The sound of her sobbing echoed through the wooden chapel like a broken hymn, and Finn Anderson stood frozen in the doorway, his dusty boots silent on the threshold, as the late afternoon sun of 1878 filtered through the stained glass windows of the little church in Nevada City, California. He had only come seeking a moment of quiet reflection after 3 weeks on the trail driving cattle north from the valley. But the sight of the young woman hunched in the front pew, her shoulders shaking with grief, made him forget his own exhaustion. Finn removed his hat, running a weathered hand through his dark hair as he debated whether to leave her to her sorrow or offer whatever comfort a stranger might provide. The decision made itself when she let out a particularly anguished cry that seemed to tear from the very depths of her soul. His spurs jingled softly as he walked down the aisle, and though she must have heard him approach, she did not lift her head from where it rested against her folded arms. Finn lowered himself onto the pew beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them, and set his hat on his knee. For a long moment he said nothing, simply sitting in companionable silence as her tears continued to fall. Finally he spoke, his voice low and gentle. "Tell me what hurts." The woman startled slightly, lifting her head to reveal a face that would have been beautiful if not marred by grief and red-rimmed eyes. She looked to be in her early 20s, with auburn hair that had come loose from its pins and eyes the color of summer grass. She stared at him through her tears, seeming to weigh whether this dusty cowboy was worthy of her confidence. "Everything," she whispered, her voice hoarse from crying. "Everything hurts." Finn nodded slowly, recognizing the weight of true sorrow when he encountered it. He had known his share of loss in his 26 years, enough to understand that sometimes a person needed to speak their pain aloud before it could begin to heal. "My name is Finn," he offered. "Finn Anderson. I have been working the ranches around these parts for the better part of 5 years now, and I have learned that this chapel has good ears for listening." A ghost of something that might have been a smile flickered across her tear-stained face. "Eleanor Nichols," she replied. "Though I suppose that name means nothing anymore." "Why would you say such a thing?" Eleanor drew in a shuddering breath, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. "Because as of 3 hours ago, I have no family left in this world. My father was the last, and they buried him this morning in the cemetery on the hill." Finn felt his chest tighten with sympathy. "I am sorry for your loss. Losing a parent is a grief that cuts deep." "He was all I had," Eleanor continued, the words tumbling out now as if a dam had broken. "My mother died when I was 12 and my brother was killed in a mining accident 2 years past. Father and I ran a small boarding house on the edge of town. It was not much, but it was ours. We made a life together, just the two of us. What happened to him?" His heart gave out. Eleanor's voice cracked. "The doctor said he had been sick for longer than any of us knew, that he had hidden it to spare me worry. He collapsed behind the front desk last Thursday, and by Friday night he was gone. I held his hand as he died, and he told me not to be afraid, that I was strong enough to face whatever came next." She laughed bitterly. "I do not feel very strong right now." Finn reached into his vest pocket and produced a clean handkerchief, offering it to her. Eleanor took it gratefully, dabbing at her eyes. "Strength is not the absence of tears," Finn said quietly. "My own father used to tell me that the bravest thing a person can do is feel their pain fully and then choose to keep living anyway." "Where is your father now?" "Dead these past 7 years. Typhoid fever took him and my mother both within a week of each other back in Missouri. That is what brought me west, actually. I could not bear to stay in a place that reminded me of them at every turn." Eleanor studied him with new eyes, seeing past the trail dust and worn leather to the man beneath. There was kindness in his face, she realized, and a quiet understanding that came only from having walked through the valley of grief oneself. "What will you do now?" Finn asked. "Do you have other family elsewhere? Friends who might help?" "No family," Eleanor said. "And as for friends, well, most people in this town were friendly enough when my father was alive, but I have already seen how quickly sympathy turns to gossip. Before the funeral was even over, I heard Mrs. Patterson telling her daughter that a young, unmarried woman has no business trying to run a boarding house alone. By tomorrow, half the town will be speculating about my prospects and whether I will have to sell." "Will you? Have to sell, I mean." Eleanor's jaw tightened with determination. "Not if I can help it. That boarding house represents every bit of work my father put into building a life here. I will not let it go without a fight." Finn found himself admiring her resolve even as he recognized the practical difficulties she would face. Nevada City was rough country, built on gold and silver, and sustained by the men who worked the mines and the cattle that fed them. A woman alone would face challenges at every turn, from creditors who might doubt her ability to pay to rougher elements who might see her as an easy target. "Do you know anything about running a boarding house?" he asked. "I have been helping my father run it since I was old enough to make a bed and cook a meal," Eleanor replied with a flash of pride. "I know the business inside and out. What I lack is not knowledge or ability, but rather the thing that seems to matter most in this world, which is being born male." Finn could not help but smile at her spirit. "That is a fair point. Though I have known my share of incompetent men who thought their gender alone qualified them for tasks they had no business attempting." "Then you are wiser than most." Eleanor finally met his eyes properly, and Finn felt something shift in his chest, a sensation he had not experienced in longer than he cared to remember. "Listen," he said, making a decision that surprised even himself. "I have just finished a cattle drive and have 3 weeks before I need to be back at the ranch. I am a decent hand with repairs, and I know my way around most problems that might crop up at a place like a boarding house. If you would like help getting things in order, figuring out what needs doing and such, I would be willing to lend a hand." Eleanor's eyes widened. "Why would you do that? You do not even know me." "No, but I know what it is like to be alone in the world and wishing someone had offered help when it was needed most. Consider it a kindness freely given with no strings attached. If you would prefer I leave you be, I will respect that. But the offer stands." For a long moment, Eleanor simply stared at him, searching his face for any sign of ulterior motive. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her because she slowly nodded. "I accept your offer, Mr. Anderson. Thank you. Just Finn, please. Then you must call me Eleanor." They sat together in the chapel a while longer, the silence between them now comfortable rather than awkward. Outside, the sun continued its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. When Eleanor finally rose to leave, Finn stood as well, and they walked out together into the cooling evening air. The boarding house proved to be a sturdy 2-story structure at the southern edge of town, painted white with green shutters and a wide front porch. A hand-painted sign reading "Nichols Boarding House" swung gently in the breeze. Eleanor unlocked the front door and led Finn inside, through a tidy parlor and into a dining room with a long table that could seat a dozen people. "We have 8 rooms for rent upstairs," Eleanor explained, her voice steadier now that she was on familiar ground. "Right now 5 of them are occupied. There is Mr. Chen, who works as a carpenter, the Morrison brothers, who are miners, Mrs. Blackwell, a widow who teaches at the schoolhouse, and Mr. Davies, who runs the assay office. They all paid through the end of the month, but I do not know if they will stay on once they realize my father is gone." "Have you spoken with them?" "Not properly." I left a note on the message board in the hallway letting them know that meals would continue as normal, but I have been too. She trailed off, gesturing helplessly. Too grief-stricken to conduct business, Finn finished gently. That is understandable. But you will need to speak with them soon, let them know your intentions. Uncertainty makes people nervous, and nervous people make rash decisions. Eleanor nodded, squaring her shoulders. You are right. I will speak with them at breakfast tomorrow morning. Would it help if I were there? Not to speak for you, but just as a presence. Sometimes having someone stand with you makes difficult conversations easier. Yes, Eleanor said, relief evident in her voice. Yes, that would help very much. Finn ended up taking the vacant room at the end of the upstairs hallway. A simple space with a bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the street. It was considerably more comfortable than the bunkhouse he usually called home, and the price Eleanor quoted him was more than fair. He paid her for 2 weeks in advance, insisting despite her protests, and then helped her prepare dinner for the boarders. The meal was a quiet affair, with Eleanor introducing Finn simply as a new guest who would be staying for a while. The other boarders offered their condolences about her father, but there was an underlying tension in their polite words, a waiting quality that suggested they were indeed uncertain about the future. Finn watched Eleanor handle their concerns with grace, promising that nothing would change in the running of the house, and found himself impressed by her composure. After dinner, as they washed dishes in the kitchen, Eleanor finally allowed some of her exhaustion to show. "Thank you for being there," she said quietly. "I do not think I could have faced them alone tonight." "You are stronger than you believe," Finn replied, drying a plate with a kitchen towel. "But there is no shame in accepting help. We all need it from time to time." Over the following days, Finn threw himself into making himself useful around the boarding house. He repaired a loose step on the front porch, fixed a leaking pipe in the upstairs washroom, and helped Eleanor sort through her father's business papers to get a clear picture of the house's finances. The news was better than Eleanor had feared, but not as good as she had hoped. The boarding house was solvent, but there was little margin for error. "If I can keep the current boarders and fill the empty rooms, we will be fine," Eleanor said, studying the ledger with a furrowed brow. "But if people start leaving, or if there is any unexpected expense, then we make sure people stay and new ones come," Finn said firmly. "This is a good establishment, Eleanor. Clean, comfortable, and with cooking that beats anything else in town by a country mile. Once word spreads that you are running things, you will have no shortage of interested parties. You have a great deal of faith in me. I have seen enough in the past few days to know it is well placed." As the days turned into a week, and then 2, Finn found himself increasingly reluctant to think about returning to the ranch. He told himself it was because Eleanor still needed help, that he wanted to make sure she was truly stable before he left. But in the quiet moments, usually late at night when he could not sleep, he admitted to himself that his motivations had become more complicated. He was drawn to Eleanor in ways that had nothing to do with her circumstances. He admired her determination, her refusal to be defeated by tragedy. He found himself looking for excuses to make her smile, storing away her laughter like a treasure. And when their hands accidentally brushed while working side by side, he felt a jolt of awareness that left him unsettled for hours afterward. Eleanor, for her part, seemed equally affected by his presence, though she fought to maintain proper boundaries. She caught herself watching him when she thought he was not looking, noticing the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentleness in his strong hands as he worked. She had not expected to feel anything beyond gratitude toward this stranger who had offered help in her darkest hour, but somewhere along the way, Gratitude had transformed into something deeper and infinitely more dangerous. The turning point came on a warm afternoon when Finn was replacing some rotted boards on the back porch. Eleanor brought him a glass of cold water and sat on the steps, watching him work. The Morrison brothers had given notice that morning, having decided to try their luck in the silver mines further north, and Eleanor had been unusually quiet since. "I keep trying to tell myself it is not personal," she said suddenly, "that they were planning to leave anyway. But part of me wonders if they would have stayed if my father were still alive." Finn set down his hammer and took the water glass, draining it in long swallows before answering. "Maybe they would have and maybe they would not. The mining life is unpredictable that way. Men are always chasing the next strike, the next fortune. But I will tell you this, Eleanor. Anyone who leaves this place is a fool. You have built something worth staying for." "I have built nothing. This was my father's dream." "Was it? Or did you make it yours too, somewhere along the way?" Finn sat down beside her on the step, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "From what I have seen, you have as much claim to this place as he ever did. You are the one who knows Mrs. Blackwell takes her tea weak with honey. You remember that Mr. Chen prefers his eggs scrambled, and Mr. Davies likes his bacon crisp. You notice when the parlor flowers need replacing and when the lamp oil is running low. This is not your father's boarding house anymore, Eleanor. It is yours." Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes, but they were different from the hopeless tears she had shed in the chapel. These were tears of recognition, of being seen and understood in a way she had not realized she needed. "I am afraid," she whispered. "Afraid I will fail. Afraid I will lose everything he worked for. Fear is natural. But let me ask you something. If your father were here right now, what would he tell you?" Eleanor thought about it, a sad smile crossing her face. "He would tell me that failure only comes from not trying. That the only way to truly lose is to give up before the fight even begins." Sounds like a wise man. He was. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the town around them. A dog barked in the distance. Somewhere a woman called her children in for supper. The daily stagecoach rumbled past on the main street, carrying news and mail from Sacramento. "Finn," Eleanor said hesitantly, "you said you needed to be back at the ranch soon. When are you leaving?" The question hung in the air between them, weighted with unspoken meaning. Finn had been dreading this moment, knowing he would have to address it eventually. "My employer is expecting me back by the end of the week," he said carefully. "But I have been thinking. The ranch work pays steady, but it is not the kind of life that offers much room for building something permanent. I have been drifting for 7 years now, telling myself I was too restless to settle down. But lately I have been wondering if maybe I was just waiting to find a reason to stop drifting." Eleanor turned to look at him fully, her heart pounding. "What are you saying?" Finn met her gaze steadily, his expression serious. "I am saying that if you would have me, I would like to stay on here. Not just as a temporary guest, but as something more permanent. I could help run the boarding house, handle the repairs and the heavier work, deal with any trouble that might crop up. In return, I would ask for room and board and maybe a small wage when the finances allow for it." "Finn, I cannot ask you to give up your livelihood for this. For me. You are not asking, I am offering. There is a difference." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand in his. "Eleanor, I am not a man given to fancy speeches or flowery words. But I need you to understand something. These past 2 weeks have been the most content I have felt since before my parents died. Being here, helping you, watching you face each day with courage despite your grief, it has reminded me that there is more to life than just getting by. And if I am being honest with myself and with you, I do not want to leave. I do not want to go back to that ranch and spend the next months wondering how you are faring, worrying whether you are safe and well. I want to be here with you, helping you build the life you deserve." Eleanor felt as though her heart might burst from her chest. "But we hardly know each other." "Then we will get to know each other better. I am not asking for promises or commitments beyond the business arrangement I outlined. I understand that you are grieving, that you have more than enough to deal with without adding courtship complications to the mix. I am simply asking for the chance to stay, to prove myself useful and worthy of your trust." Eleanor knew she should be cautious, should take time to consider such a significant decision. But as she looked into Finn's honest blue eyes and felt the warmth of his calloused hand holding hers, she realized that she had already made her choice. Perhaps she had made it that first day in the chapel, when a stranger had sat beside her in her darkest moment and offered comfort without expectation. "Yes," she said. "Stay, please stay." The smile that broke across Finn's face was like sunrise after a long night. He squeezed her hand gently before releasing it, conscious of propriety even in this private moment. "I will need to ride out to the ranch tomorrow to collect my things and speak with the foreman," he said. "It is about 4 hours south of here. I should be back before dark. Be careful." "I will." True to his word, Finn departed the next morning on his roan gelding, promising to return before nightfall. Eleanor watched him ride off with an anxiety she tried to tell herself was merely practical concern, but she knew better. In the space of 2 weeks, this man had become integral to not just her business but her life itself, and the thought of something happening to him filled her with dread. The day passed slowly. Eleanor threw herself into work, changing linens and preparing a beef stew for dinner, but her mind kept drifting to Finn on the trail. She found herself going to the window repeatedly, scanning the street for any sign of his return. When the sun began to set and he still had not appeared, Eleanor felt genuine fear begin to creep in. The trail between Nevada City and the ranch was generally safe, but accidents could happen. A horse could throw a shoe or step in a hole. There were still outlaws in these hills, men desperate enough to rob a lone traveler. And wild animals, though rare, were not unheard of. Full dark had fallen when Eleanor finally heard hoofbeats outside. She rushed to the door, flinging it open to see Finn dismounting from his horse, saddlebags thrown over his shoulder and a bedroll strapped to his back. Relief flooded through her with such intensity that she had to grip the doorframe for support. "Sorry for the lateness," Finn called out, tying his horse to the hitching post. "The foreman wanted to talk things through more thoroughly than I had anticipated. Tried to convince me to stay on, offered better wages and such, but I told him my mind was made up." Eleanor wanted to run to him, to throw her arms around him and assure herself that he was truly safe and back where he belonged. Instead, she managed a smile and stepped aside to let him enter. "There is stew still warm on the stove if you are hungry. Starving, actually." They sat together in the kitchen while Finn ate, and he told her about his day. The foreman had indeed been disappointed to lose him, which spoke well of his work ethic and skills. Several of the other ranch hands had expressed surprise at his decision to leave, unable to understand why any man would choose to work at a boarding house over the relative freedom of ranch life. "What did you tell them?" Eleanor asked. Finn met her eyes over his bowl. "I told them the truth. That I had found something worth staying for." The air between them grew charged with unspoken feelings. Eleanor felt her cheeks warm under his gaze. "I should let you get settled in your room," she said, rising from her chair. "It has been a long day for both of us." But as she turned to go, Finn caught her hand gently. "Eleanor, wait." She looked back at him, her pulse racing. "I know I said I would not push for more than a business arrangement," Finn said quietly. "And I meant that." I will not pressure you or rush you or expect anything beyond what you are willing to give. But I think we both know that what is growing between us is more than just employer and employee. When you are ready, if you are ever ready, I want you to know that my feelings are engaged here. Deeply engaged. Eleanor's breath caught. She knew she should be sensible, should protect her heart until more time had passed and she could be certain of her feelings. But she was tired of being sensible, tired of denying what she knew to be true. My feelings are engaged as well, she admitted softly. I have been trying not to let them be, trying to tell myself it is too soon and too complicated. But the truth is, Finn, you have become important to me. More important than is probably wise given how recently we met. Finn stood slowly, still holding her hand. There is no rule book for this sort of thing. No proper timeline that must be followed. We have both known loss, Eleanor. We both understand how fragile life can be. If we have found something real and good in each other, I see no reason to deny it just because others might think it too fast or too convenient. What are you saying? I am saying that I would like to court you properly, if you will allow it. Nothing that would cause scandal or impropriety. But walks together in the evening, conversations beyond just business matters, the chance to know your heart as well as I am coming to know your strength and courage. Eleanor felt tears sting her eyes, but they were happy tears this time. Yes, I would like that very much. Finn lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Then we will take this one day at a time and see where it leads us. Over the following weeks, Nevada City watched with great interest as the relationship between Eleanor Nichols and Finn Anderson developed. There was gossip, of course, particularly from the likes of Mrs. Patterson, who declared it unseemly for a woman in mourning to be courting so soon after her father's death. But there were others who saw the situation differently, who recognized that Eleanor had found not just a business partner but a genuine companion who treated her with respect and affection. Finn proved himself invaluable around the boarding house, handling not just repairs, but also dealing with the occasional difficult customer or late-paying tenant. His steady presence gave Eleanor the confidence to negotiate better rates with suppliers and to be firmer in her business dealings. The 3 empty rooms were soon filled with new boarders, including a young teacher fresh from San Francisco and 2 merchants who traveled regularly between Nevada City and Sacramento. But it was in the quiet moments that their relationship truly flourished. Evening walks through town, where they talked about everything from their childhoods to their dreams for the future. Sunday afternoons spent reading together in the parlor after the boarders had gone out. The comfortable silence of working side by side, knowing that words were not always necessary to feel connected. 3 months after that first meeting in the chapel, Finn asked Eleanor to accompany him on a picnic by the Deer Creek. It was a beautiful autumn day, the air crisp and clean, the aspens turning gold on the surrounding hillsides. They found a quiet spot beside the water, spreading a blanket under a cottonwood tree. I have been thinking, Finn said as they ate fried chicken and biscuits from the basket Eleanor had packed. The boarding house is doing well now. Better than well, actually. You have built something successful and stable. We have built it, Eleanor corrected. I could not have done this without you, Finn. Perhaps, but it is still your place, Eleanor. Your name on the deed and the sign. I am just someone who works there. Eleanor frowned, sensing there was more behind his words. What are you trying to say? Finn set down his food and turned to face her fully. I am saying that I do not want to be just someone who works there anymore. I do not want to be the hired help or even just the man who is courting the owner. I want more than that, Eleanor. I want everything. Eleanor's heart began to pound. Finn, let me finish, he said gently. These past months with you have been the happiest of my life. You have given me purpose and partnership and something I had almost given up hoping I would find. You have given me love, Eleanor, though we have both been too cautious to speak the word aloud. But I am speaking it now. I love you. I love your strength and your kindness and your stubborn determination. I love the way you hum while you cook and the way you bite your lip when you are working through a problem. I love everything about you, and I do not want to spend another day without you knowing it. Tears were streaming down Eleanor's face now, but she was smiling through them. I love you too. I think I have loved you since that day in the chapel when you sat beside a complete stranger and offered comfort without question. Finn reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Eleanor gasped as he opened it to reveal a simple gold band set with a single small diamond. "It is not much," Finn said, suddenly nervous. "The ranch paid me well, but I had not been saving for a ring. I can get you something better in time, something more worthy of you." "It is perfect," Eleanor whispered. "Eleanor Nichols, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Would you let me stand beside you not just as a partner in business but as a husband, a true equal in all things?" "Yes," Eleanor said, laughing and crying at once. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." Finn slipped the ring onto her finger, and then he was pulling her close, kissing her with all the pent-up emotion of the past months. Eleanor melted into his embrace, feeling as though all the broken pieces inside her were finally being made whole. They were married 6 weeks later in the same chapel where they had first met, with most of the town in attendance. Mrs. Blackwell cried happy tears, and Mr. Chen gifted them a beautiful wooden headboard he had carved himself. Even Mrs. Patterson grudgingly attended, though she sniffed throughout the ceremony in a way that suggested she still had opinions about the propriety of it all. But Eleanor and Finn paid no mind to the gossips. They were too busy beginning their new life together, a partnership built on mutual respect, deep affection, and the kind of love that weathers all storms. The boarding house continued to thrive under their joint management. They worked together seamlessly, Eleanor handling the books and the cooking while Finn managed repairs and dealt with any troubles that arose. They became known throughout Nevada City as a model of what a marriage partnership could be, with neither trying to dominate the other, but instead working toward shared goals. A year after their wedding, Eleanor discovered she was expecting their first child. The pregnancy was not easy, with bouts of sickness that left her weak and exhausted. Finn took over more of the daily operations without complaint, hiring a local woman named Sarah to help with the cooking and cleaning. He tended to Eleanor with gentle devotion, bringing her tea and toast when she could not face fuller meals, reading to her when she was confined to bed rest in her final months. Their son was born on a snowy January morning in 1880, a healthy baby with his father's blue eyes and his mother's auburn hair. They named him James, after Eleanor's father, and watching Finn cradle their infant son, Eleanor felt her heart overflow with gratitude for the unexpected path her life had taken. "I never imagined this," she told Finn one quiet night as they sat together in the nursery, watching James sleep. "After my father died, I thought I would spend my life alone, fighting just to survive. I never dreamed I would have this. A husband who loves me, a child, a real future." Finn kissed her temples softly. "We have built something worth having, you and I. And we will keep building it, one day at a time, for as long as we both shall live." The years flowed by like water in the creek, sometimes rushing and turbulent, other times slow and peaceful, but always moving forward. James grew into a sturdy boy who loved following his father around the boarding house, eager to learn everything about fixing and building. 2 years after James came a daughter, whom they named Grace, and 3 years after that another daughter, Caroline. The boarding house evolved with their family, becoming not just a place of business but a true home. The long-term boarders became almost like family themselves, celebrating birthdays and holidays together, pitching in to help when times were hard. Mr. Chen taught James to work with wood. Mrs. Blackwell, who had since retired from teaching, helped Eleanor homeschool the children in their younger years. By 1890, Nevada City had grown and changed significantly. The wild days of the gold rush were long past, replaced by a more settled community. The boarding house had been expanded to accommodate more guests, and Finn and Eleanor had trained their eldest son to help with the management. At 42, Finn's hair showed threads of silver, but he was as strong and capable as ever. Eleanor, at 38, had grown from the grieving young woman in the chapel to a confident businesswoman and mother, respected throughout the community. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Finn and Eleanor took a rare day away from the boarding house, leaving it in James's capable hands. They rode out to the same spot by Deer Creek where Finn had proposed, spreading a blanket under the same cottonwood tree, now fuller and more spreading than it had been a decade before. "You ever regret it?" Eleanor asked, leaning against Finn's shoulder as they watched the water flow past. "Giving up the ranch life. You could have gone anywhere, done anything. Instead, you chose to run a boarding house with a widow who had nothing to offer but problems." Finn turned to face her, cupping her cheek in his weathered hand. "You had everything to offer, Eleanor. Everything that mattered anyway. A good heart, a strong spirit, and the courage to keep going when the world tried to break you. I found my home that day in the chapel, even if I did not fully realize it at the time, and I have never regretted a single moment of the life we have built together. Even when James broke your favorite hammer trying to fix the porch railing. Even then," Finn said with a laugh, "though I was tempted." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the late afternoon sun paint the hillsides gold. After all these years, they could still sit together without needing to fill the quiet with unnecessary words. They had learned each other's rhythms, the ebb and flow of thought and feeling that made up a long marriage. "I have been thinking about the future," Eleanor said eventually. "James is almost old enough to take over the full management of the boarding house, and Grace has been talking about opening a dress shop in town. Caroline is still young, but she is bright as a new penny and will make her own mark on the world." "What are you saying?" "I am saying that perhaps it is time for us to step back a little. Not retire completely, but let our children take the reins while we enjoy the life we have worked so hard to build. We could travel a bit, see San Francisco finally, maybe even take that trip to the ocean you have always talked about." Finn smiled, pulling her closer. "I think that sounds perfect. We have built something that will outlast us, Eleanor, a legacy not just of business but of family and love. Our children know what it means to work hard and treat people fairly. They understand that success is not measured just in dollars but in the lives you touch and the kindness you show. We have done well, you and I. We have done more than well. We have done something extraordinary." As the sun set over the California hills, Finn and Eleanor Anderson sat together under the cottonwood tree, holding hands and planning the next chapter of their remarkable journey together. The boarding house would continue to thrive under James's management, becoming a landmark in Nevada City, known for its comfort and hospitality. Grace would indeed open her dress shop, which would become the finest in the region. And Caroline would eventually become a teacher, carrying on Mrs. Blackwell's legacy of education. But that evening by the creek, none of those future accomplishments mattered as much as the simple fact of being together, of having found each other in the midst of grief and built something beautiful from the ashes of loss. They had proven that love could bloom in the most unexpected places, that a cowboy and a grieving woman could meet in a chapel and create a lifetime of happiness. Years later, when their grandchildren would ask how they met, Finn and Eleanor would always tell the same story. About a day when sorrow led Eleanor to seek solace in an old wooden chapel, and how a dusty cowboy had sat beside her and said 4 simple words that changed everything. "Tell me what hurts." And from that moment of shared vulnerability and kindness, they had built a life rich with love, laughter, and the deep satisfaction of knowing they had found exactly what they had been searching for, even if they had not known they were searching at all. The boarding house still stands in Nevada City to this day, now run by the 4th generation of Andersons. And in the small chapel at the edge of town, there is a brass plaque placed there by the family, commemorating the spot where everything began. It reads simply, "In this place, 2 souls found each other. May all who enter seeking comfort find the same grace. Finn and Eleanor Anderson, 1878–1912. Their love story became the stuff of local legend, told and retold to each new generation as proof that sometimes the greatest loves are the ones that begin not with grand gestures or dramatic romance, but with simple human kindness offered freely in a moment of need. They lived long, full lives together, never taking for granted the gift they had been given in each other. Finn passed away first, in the spring of 1912, at the age of 60. Eleanor held his hand as he slipped away peacefully in his sleep, much as she had held her father's hand so many years before. But this time, though her grief was profound, she was not alone. She was surrounded by children and grandchildren, by the life and legacy she and Finn had built together. Eleanor followed him 2 years later, and they were buried side by side in the cemetery on the hill overlooking Nevada City. Their gravestone bears both their names and a simple inscription chosen by their children. Together they built a life of love and service. Together they rest in peace. But their story does not end in that cemetery. It lives on in every act of kindness between strangers, in every person who chooses to sit beside someone who is hurting and offer comfort. It lives on in the boarding house that still welcomes travelers seeking a clean bed and a warm meal. It lives on in their descendants, who carry forward the values of compassion, partnership, and enduring love that defined Finn and Eleanor's remarkable marriage. And on quiet afternoons, when the light slants just right through the stained glass windows of the old chapel, some say you can still feel the presence of that moment when everything changed. When a cowboy found a woman weeping and chose kindness over indifference, setting in motion a love story that would span decades and touch countless lives. That is the power of choosing to care, of reaching out when it would be easier to walk away. That is the magic that happens when 2 damaged souls recognize each other and decide to heal together rather than remain broken alone. It was true for Finn and Eleanor Anderson in 1878, and it remains true for anyone brave enough to sit beside another's pain and ask, simply and sincerely, "Tell me what hurts."